Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna say.
All you citizens of the world, welcome to Live from the Heartland, the second half of the show for the week of October 19th, the year 2024. I'm Michael James, and I'm talking to an old friend of mine. We are both old, and we've known each other since 1960. It's the one and only Carole Travis, who I met when we were together at Lake Forest College, and she went on to be the executive director for a time of the Service Employees International Union Illinois State Council. She is the retired president of the United Auto Workers Local 719, where they used to build locomotives. She's a longtime activist, a lawyer. And I'm going to say she is the daughter of the renowned Bob Travis, Fightin' Bob Travis, who led the Flint sit-down strikes in the 30s. And Carole came to mind. She and her partner, Steve Tapas, they live in North Carolina, and they live right near Asheville. So I thought of them when with not only all the politics going on in North Carolina, but with the hurricane and the tornadoes. And we've got her here, and this is not the first time she's been on the show. Back on May 14th, 2022, she was on. So, Carole, I know I've got you in a parking lot there somewhere, and so far, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So let's start with politics.
Okay.
You don't know what's going to happen, right, in North Carolina,
Exactly.
but it's certainly come into play with the Democrats these days. They're talking about it as a possible pickup state.
Right. First of all, it's hard to tell what's going to happen here because we are categorized as a toss-up, and I'm not connected the way I used to be here and there, so I know what everybody knows, that it's I know some more than that, but it is a toss-up, and we don't know what people who don't listen to CNN or MSNBC or hear about Mark Robinson. We think that who's the current lieutenant governor, who's the black Nazi, who's the pornography with trans people, but is also called trans people vermin. But we hear all the stuff about him, and also that he and his wife ran a daycare center, which was closed by the state because it was filthy and they weren't taking care of kids, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know what people who don't listen to the same sources I listen to know about Mark Robinson. So I know he's saying that's all lies, so that maybe that's all they hear. So I don't know. But there's a lot of work being done, and there's the new chairman of the Democratic Party in North Carolina is a young woman. I think her last name is Clayton, but she's 24 years old, and she comes from a farming family. So she's a long time, deep roots, connected, and has a sense of how to talk to people in rural areas, which in general, the Democratic Party is not strong on, right? It's much more an urban, coastal, etc. party. Anyway, so I don't know.
Well, we have great hope. In the governor's race, the running against this guy, Mark Robinson, is a guy named Josh Stein. And what do you think his chances are? Any sense? He's got Roy Cooper, the current governor, who I think has been very good. And, he was in consideration for the vice presidential spot.
Right.
He can't run because he's served 2 terms already. Any sense on how that race might turn out?
I think that because of Robinson being so terrible, and because everybody knowing it, and because Josh Stein is so good, he's a former attorney general here. And there's been a lot of money flowing in to help Stein in hopes that it also helps Harris Walz, that you do democratic work, that it helps the whole slate. And everybody talks about the importance of voting the whole slate, because the woman who's running, for example, for head of public education, whose last name is Morrow, I can't remember her first name, but she has said it would be a good way to raise money would be to have pay-per-view, firing squad, murder, execution of Obama. And she thinks public schools are brainwashing institutions, and she's running for the head of the head of the Board of Education for North Carolina.
It brings back a memory for me. I had a relative or a good friend of my grandmother's, et cetera, who came from New York, I think originally, but was involved in education big time in North Carolina. And it really, my understanding was North Carolina had a real good public school system at one time.
Yes, and because I'm old and don't have any children or grandchildren here, I don't know as much as I might, but it appears that at least Buncombe County, which is where Asheville and where we live, has not only a good system, but it had been talking about joining with Asheville and having Asheville and the whole county work together for the schools. And Asheville has a very good school system. Asheville is like the Berkeley of the South, or it's like Austin, Texas. It's a home for transgender, gay people, lefties, socialists, artists, beer drinkers, music people, people who do edgy healthcare practices, which I'm a fan of. Right. Anyway.
Well, I was in Asheville one time, and I was working in the film The Fugitive. I played, I'm in it's the scene of the train wreck scene. And I went with some noted actor whose name I don't remember. And we drove
David Jansen. No,
it wasn't him. We drove from the town of Cherokee to Asheville, and I had an onion loaf at Chili's. So that's my only experience, but I'm coming down to see you guys. Let me go back to the ballot again on the presidential ballot. My understanding is that in North Carolina, both Kennedy and Cornel West are both on the ballot. True? And
that's correct.
What kind of impact might that have?
Well, I have no idea what impact, although there was a young person who lives kind of across the street doesn't make exact sense because I live in a semi-rural area, but down the road a piece, who is a trans kid who grew up here, whose stepfather doesn't like him because he's trans and also he's a little crazy. But he was giving me a long thing about that he's a socialist. This was a few weeks ago. He's changed now. He goes back and forth. He was a socialist, and he's not voting for anybody because they're not good enough, and very conscious of Gaza, very conscious of electric cars have lithium batteries that are mined by people in Africa who die by the exposure to lithium, and so on and so forth. So I don't know, but I do know, there is one thing I do know. In spite of the flood, which I want to say some things about too, because it's very much, and the hurricane. All of the ballots and all of the machines for Asheville are fine. And they are now, I just heard on the radio, and by the way, radio is very important in disaster situations, because you can't get television, you can't get but radio, the minute you get power, you can get radio. So radio has been very important here for reports. So we don't have a radio. We get radio in the car, but we don't have a radio. So everybody, it's of climate change, get a little radio. But anyway,
Let's switch to the ramifications or just the situation. I know I called you guys and I texted you and emailed you for a number of days and didn't get anything back, and we were really concerned. And then our mutual friend Mary Driscoll, and she got a hold of a lot of us and let us know that you guys were safe and sound. How about Carole Travis? How about you give us a kind of a picture from when it was coming, what you thought might happen, what happened, and give us your personal recounting of these days when the hurricane struck and the tornadoes were moving around.
We had no idea. I've never been in a hurricane, so I had no idea what that means, that it's coming. But 2 days before the Helene arrived, we had torrential rains, and they went on 2 days endlessly. And so by the time Helene got here, the soil was so soaked that when the winds came, thousands of trees have been uprooted and blown around, and on houses, on cars, on roads, on like that, because the roots couldn't hold because it was mud. It was no longer in the earth, it was in mud. And so just a tremendous devastation of trees and the impact of the trees hitting things. But the bulk of the storm came, the worst part of the storm came in the middle of the night. And Steve and I are deaf, so we went to sleep and I didn't hear anything, I was like sleeping, and I wake up and what I hear, we had a Generac. And we were very lucky because we had a full house Generac, and we were the only people in our neighborhood who had any power for 14 days. And so everybody came to our house to charge their cell phones, to have coffee in the morning, to say hello to each other, and to say what they had heard, what we had all heard. We were so everybody else was without power for 14 days. Our Generac died, I think or maybe they were out with 13 days. Our Generac died at 5 a.m. one day, and I'm not sure why. And we can't get anybody because it's not important anymore, because at 5 that evening, we all got power. The whole neighborhood got power. So that was after 13 days. And we had the Wednesday before gotten water finally, which was dirty water. We told it, you had to boil it to use it for anything. And so, but it flushed toilets, which is a big deal. If you can't flush your toilet for 13 days, gets pretty shitty, So people were going down to streams and places like that, and hot tubs. Some people have hot tubs, so people were taking water out of their hot tubs once they finally, I have a hot tub, I can go down and get some water. Were carrying buckets. People were carrying buckets everywhere to flush their toilets. Then you can't wash your clothes, or it's some people did wash their clothes, but to wash your clothes in water that's got shit in it, chemicals in it, it's not. I didn't do any laundry until we got a clean, no boil order, which was only about 4 days ago. And then I did 11 loads of laundry, washed everything, because the whole place felt filthy. It was hard to get gas for your car for a while. My car had 186 miles I could go with gas. So and I'm an old person. I don't have grandchildren, children, anybody to look after. So I didn't try and get gas at the beginning because I didn't want to sit on a line 3 or 4 or 5 hours and then get to the pump and have it run out. I figured I'll just wait until finally there's more gas here and so on. So I did that. But I waited about 5 or 6 days before I went and got out a full tank of gas. It is right now, so we have clean water, we have power, and those things are make a big difference. So we don't have telephone service. That's why I'm sitting in a parking lot, because we have no internet, we have no cell service, no texting at home.
When you were driving to the parking lot, what's the scene like? Are the roads clear? Were there thousands of trees?
Oh yeah, no. So it's now, what is it? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Maybe it's 3 weeks. What's today? 2.5 weeks, something. I don't. You lose track of time. But I think it's 2.5 weeks since it hit. It hit on a Friday, and this is Wednesday. So tomorrow it'll be 3 weeks. But the number of people who came in, and the state, the federal, the volunteers, the stuff from all over the country, from Canada, that came in. So they came in, and the first thing they did was clear the trees. That was the first thing. You had to get the trees out of the way. And so it took, there's still roads, back roads that were washed out or have trees or don't exist anymore. But all of the main roads have had the trees at least put to the side. And even Blue Ridge Parkway was opened a few days ago. It was closed for a while. So within a week, you could get around. If you could get to a main road, if you were not isolated because your own road was washed out, or your really rural area, you could get around. It took a long time for grocery stores to open. One grocery store opened near where we are. It was the first one. I guess they had their own big generator. Plus, I think they got supplies from the east and the south or something, because US 40, which is a road which goes from the east to the west coast, or the west coast to the east coast. It goes all the way across. If you get it around LA, and I don't know where it ends. I think it ends somewhere in North Carolina, on the Carolina coast or something. But it was washed away to our west. And one of our north-south highways, 26, was washed out to our north. So no trucks could come in with supplies or anything from the west or from the north. So Chinook helicopters were used by the feds, to bring in a lot of stuff. We got a lot of water pretty fast, bottled water and so on. It is very stressful. It is, even when you're kind of getting along and so on and so forth, you suddenly find yourself totally exhausted, and in ways that can only be measured by it's stress, that it's just like, this is so weird and difficult and different and so on. And one of the points I want to make about all of this, then all the line, after they cleared the trees, then the utilities guys came in to get power. So that was the second step. And there's still areas without power, but we have power. Parts of Asheville was hurt worse than we were, and the water treatment plant in Asheville was wiped out, and a lot of the river. Let me give you I was trying to think of how to say it. If the Chicago River flooded the way the Suwana River and the French Broad River flooded, it would be as if it rose so that it left its banks and went 5 blocks in each direction, and went as high as the second story of buildings 4 blocks away, 5 blocks away. So it went from, it's on both sides. So it took away houses. people died in the houses who didn't get out. There were warnings, it's coming, plus the water had already risen and people were frightened. So a lot of people left, but the degree in which it left its banks, we're about like 2 blocks away from the creek that's at the bottom of a hill that we're on. And so we're both up and away, like maybe 3 blocks. So let's say 3 blocks. And we're up on a hill. So the creek, which is normally a pretty nice creek and a nice ravine and so on, became a raging river and became like 2 football fields wide. And although it didn't rise the way the French Broad did, it didn't go up, 2 stories or, like that, but it became like 2 football fields wide and just raging down. And it right near us, it took a bridge out that was between our side of the road and the main road, which is on the other side of the creek. And we could get out, and also they had a back way that everybody on that road that normally use that bridge could get out. But and a lot of rural roads were totally washed away. And so the River Arts District, which was had food, music, bars, beer bars, art, a lot of art studios, famous restaurants, the 12 Bones barbecue place, blah, blah, blah. And wonderful political murals everywhere and a lot of art stuff. That's the place that was right along the river where the French Broad River rose so high that it was like 5 blocks on either side and 2 stories high. It totally took out that whole area. A lot of buildings, a lot of art, a lot of this and that. It's gone.
Carole, have you driven into Asheville?
Yes, I have, to parts of Asheville, and everything is very, the main roads are pretty open. Asheville, because it has its whole water supply was damaged. A lot of Asheville has no water and no power. I was at I was getting an acupuncture treatment yesterday, from Chad Johnson, who's fantastic. Anyway, his place has no water, but it had power and internet. And his house, which is not far from where he lived, also had no water, but power and internet. And it's very spotty. Some people have internet and nothing else. I think you have to have power to have internet. So people who have internet also have power. But a lot of people in Asheville have neither water nor power. And they're rebuilding it from the ground up. The Army Corps of Engineers is in here and doing a fantastic job of really quickly, the way they did the Baltimore Bridge when the Baltimore Bridge collapsed. They got people in here like that, and they're working and doing miraculous work to reestablish a new comprehensive water system for an entire city. It's a phenomenal job. They're doing it a little at a time, and it's coming along in ways that people are both astonished, but to be without water is really terrible. I want to make one point before I leave. This is climate change, which means that terrible storms are going to happen everywhere, and that people this is not going to be abnormal. And so it's really important that people get it, that how important the climate change is and how important getting fossil fuel out of the air is. And I want to recommend that people watch a movie called Kiss the Ground. It's not the greatest movie, but it's the most important movie. And it talks about agricultural practices which can take carbon out of the air in addition to, stopping the fossil fuel stuff. And that concludes my rant, my speech.
Carole, you did great. I'm glad we were able to hook up. We took a few tries here and you had to move your car around. I'm glad you and Steve are good, and we'll be staying in touch with you. You're always welcome back on the show.